On February 24th, 1986, a young nurse named Sherri Rasmussen never made it through the day. By nightfall, she was dead on the floor of her own condo, and the people meant to find her killer would spend 23 years looking the wrong way. This is the chilling story of Sherri Rasmussen. It all began with two people who never should have crossed paths the way they did. John Retton was a mechanical engineering student at UCLA in the late 1970s, living in Dykstra Hall. Down the hall lived a young woman named Stephanie Lazarus, a political science and sociology major from Simi Valley. The two had a casual relationship in college, nothing serious, at least not to him. But for Stephanie, something about John stuck. Years passed. John moved on. He fell in love with a woman named Sherri Rasmussen, a sharp, hardworking nurse who would go on to become the director of nursing at a Los Angeles area hospital. Sherri was driven, kind, and deeply respected by her coworkers. In November 1985, John and Sherri got married. They moved into a condo together in Van Nuys, California, and started building the life every young couple dreams about. But Stephanie Lazarus hadn't let go. By this point, she was no longer just an old college fling. She was a Los Angeles Police Department officer, trained, armed, and connected to a system that would one day be used to protect her. In the weeks before the wedding, Sherri started noticing something wasn't right. In January 1986, Sherri was at her office when a woman showed up unannounced and confronted her. It was Stephanie. Sherri didn't know her name at the time. All she knew was that this woman had history with her husband, and that history wasn't over. Later that same month, Sherri came home one morning after John had already left for work and found a woman standing in her own living room. It was Stephanie again, this time in full LAPD uniform. Sherri firmly asked her to leave, and she did. But the fear didn't leave with her. Sherri told her father, Nels Rasmussen, about both encounters. She didn't tell John. She didn't think going to the police would help because in her mind, the woman following her around the city already was the police. In early February, Sherri and John visited her parents in Tucson, Arizona. Her father tried to convince John to move there, even offering to help him find an engineering job through his own connections. It's a small detail, but it matters because it shows a father trying to physically pull his daughter away from danger before he even fully understood what that danger was. When they returned to Los Angeles, Sherri confided in her father again. She told him she believed she was being followed on the street, sometimes by someone who looked like a young man. She was scared. On February 14th, Stephanie's roommate moved out of her apartment. A week later, on February 23rd, one of John's old college friends stopped by the condo for a visit. The next day, everything changed. On the morning of February 24th, 1986, Sherri wasn't feeling well and decided to stay home from work. She was alone in the condo. At some point that day, someone entered. What happened next was brutal. Sherri fought for her life. A ceramic vase in the home was used to strike her in the head more than once, with enough force to blacken and swell her eye. She had been pistol whipped, and then she was shot 3 times in the chest with a .38 caliber pistol. Investigators would later learn that the killer had used a pillow to muffle the gunshots, an improvised silencer, something that doesn't happen in a random burglary. It happens when someone plans ahead. When John came home that night, he walked into a nightmare. His wife of 3 months was dead on the floor. The scene looked like a robbery. Drawers were open, items were out of place. Stereo equipment had been stacked up near the front door, as if someone had been getting ready to carry it out. To the detectives who arrived that night, it looked exactly like what they assumed it was, a burglary that turned violent when the homeowner came home at the wrong moment. Except Sherri hadn't come home at the wrong moment. She was already home. She was already there before anyone broke in. That detail would matter more than anyone realized for over 2 decades. The original investigators, led by a detective named Mayer along with a partner named Hooks, treated the case as exactly what it appeared to be on the surface. They didn't have fingerprints. They didn't have a clear witness. They didn't have a murder weapon. What they did have was a grieving father standing in front of them, telling them his daughter had been confronted twice by a jealous ex-girlfriend of her husband's. a woman who happened to carry a badge and a gun for the LAPD. Nels Rasmussen gave them her name. He told them she was a police officer. He believed from the very beginning that this was personal, not random. The detectives also looked briefly at a disgruntled coworker of Sherri's, someone with tension in the workplace. But the burglary theory held. Detectives later pointed to an unrelated incident nearby, where a woman interrupted two male burglars in her own home and they fled, giving police sketches of two men. To investigators, this seemed to support their theory. It didn't matter that there was no evidence connecting those men to Sherri's murder at all. The case moved forward on an assumption, and that assumption became cement. As the months passed, the trail went cold. Mayer retired in 1991. Hooks was transferred to another division a few years later. A new detective took over the file and told Nels Rasmussen point blank that he didn't think any new leads would come from it. In 1993, Nels did something extraordinary for a grieving father. He offered to personally pay for DNA testing on the evidence collected from the scene, technology that was finally becoming available to law enforcement. He was told no. He was told the department needed an actual suspect before they could even consider testing. Think about that for a moment. The father had handed them a suspect's name 7 years earlier. Records later showed that in October of that same year, detectives did briefly show renewed interest in the case, but nothing came of it. In 1997, a former coworker of Sherri's secretary came forward and contacted police. She explained that sometime after the murder, the secretary had told her about that January 1986 confrontation in Sherri's office, the one where a strange woman showed up demanding to speak with her. It was a real lead, a real witness account, tying back directly to Stephanie. But no one followed up before the secretary passed away 3 years later. Another opportunity gone. The case sat largely untouched until 2001 when the LAPD's newly formed cold case unit picked the file back up. A detective named Cliff Shepard took a fresh look and noticed something the original file had recorded but never fully used: a bite mark on Sherri's left arm. DNA science had advanced. Shepard pushed to have that bite mark evidence tested. It allowed investigators to start eliminating suspects one by one using actual genetic comparison, something the case had never had before. The real turning point came years later, around 2008 and into 2009, when a detective named Jim Nuttall picked the file up, intending to give it one last review before sending it off to the archives for good. As he read through decades-old reports, one detail stopped him cold. The stereo equipment stacked by the front door, the equipment that made this look like a burglary, had Sherri's blood on it. That meant she was already dead or dying when whoever staged that scene touched it. If a burglar wanted that stereo, they had every opportunity in the world to simply pick it up and walk out the door. Instead, it was stacked neatly by the entrance and left behind. Nuttall realized the murder wasn't the accident. The murder was the goal. The burglary was the cover story. With that realization, the entire case flipped. Nuttall and his team, including a detective named Rob Bubb, went back to Sherri's family and to John Ruetten himself. John told them something staggering. He said he had given Stephanie Lazarus's name to the original detectives back in 1986, told them she was a police officer, told them about the confrontations. That conversation, he said, was never even written down. Working from this new angle, investigators built a short list of 5 women connected to Sherri's life. They started eliminating them one at a time. Sherri's sister, her mother, and a close friend all voluntarily gave DNA samples and were cleared almost immediately. The coworker with workplace tension was cleared next. That left one name: Stephanie Lazarus, John's old college girlfriend, now a 25-year veteran of the LAPD working as an art theft detective. 4 months after reopening the case, detectives did something no one investigating this murder had ever done in over 2 decades. They put together a covert surveillance team and began watching Stephanie Lazarus, one of their own. They followed her to a Costco. They waited. When she discarded a drink cup in the trash, they collected it. That cup held her DNA. It was sent for testing and compared against the genetic profile lifted from the bite mark on Sherri's arm, the same bite mark that sat in evidence storage for over 20 years. It was a match. In June 2009, detectives brought Stephanie Lazarus in for an interview at Parker Center. the same building she had worked in for years. They told her she was a suspect in the 1986 murder of Sherri Rasmussen. Her response was immediate denial. "If you guys are claiming that I'm a suspect, then, I got a problem with that," she said, before cutting the interview short and asking for a lawyer. The moment she stepped out of that interrogation room, she was placed under arrest. The trial began years later, and it revealed details the public had never heard. John Reeton testified that his relationship with Stephanie in college had involved casual intimacy, and that he had even slept with her again shortly after getting engaged to Sherri. During the investigation, colleagues recalled Lazarus once mentioning, years earlier, that she had been interviewed as part of a homicide case involving a former boyfriend's missing wife who may have been shot, a chilling admission hiding in plain sight for decades. Investigators also found that some original case files appeared to have evidence removed or altered, evidence that Lazarus, working inside the department for years, may have had direct access to. Sherri's parents later sued the LAPD over how the investigation had been handled, but the lawsuit was unsuccessful. In March 2012, Stephanie Lazarus was convicted of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. For over 2 decades, she had wanted, worked alongside, investigated cases beside, and worn the same badge as the very detectives who would eventually catch her. She built a career, a family, a life, while Sherri Rasmussen's family buried their daughter not knowing the killer was carrying a badge issued by the same department that failed them. Stephanie Lazarus did not publicly admit guilt for years. It wasn't until a parole hearing in November 2023 that she finally spoke about what happened, claiming she never intended to kill Sherri, only to confront her. The retired lead detective on the case, Greg Stearns, rejected that version of events entirely, pointing to the cordage she allegedly brought with her, the silencer she improvised, and the calculated nature of the attack as proof this was not some spontaneous confrontation gone wrong. That parole grant was reversed in 2024 after California's governor and the Rasmussen family pushed back, arguing she still hadn't shown genuine remorse. She remains behind bars today, her future still being decided one hearing at a time. Sherri Rasmussen's father spent years being told there was nothing more anyone could do, that the leads had dried up, that the case was simply unsolvable. He gave them a name in 1986. It took the Los Angeles Police Department 23 years to listen to him, and by then his daughter had been gone for almost half her life. Somewhere in a case file that sat untouched for decades, the truth was always there, waiting for someone to finally stack the pieces the way Sherri's killer once stacked that stereo by the door and ask the one question nobody had thought to ask before: why would a burglar leave everything behind?